Hello everyone. Now, unless you've been hiding under a rock, I'm pretty sure you've heard of Bridgerton. So I've decided to talk about how accurate the clothing is. Not whether it's good or bad, but whether it is historically accurate or not, and how close some pieces get to being historically accurate, and how some pieces are a little bit need improvement. So, first off, I thought I'd start off with the men. Now, Julie Andrews says,
Grosvenor Square, 1813.
So now we know when it is set. It is set in 1813 during the London season. Now, the London season was built around members of Parliament, and it was a way for high society to shift to London so that it could basically entertain the young members of Parliament to go to balls and everything. And the season for the year 1813 ran from November to July, with a bit of a break in the middle. So Bridgerton is clearly set in that latter part where it's much sunnier. You see them walking about and going to parties, and there being a lot of outside entertainment. So let's look at the men's dress. First off, let's look at the shirts. Now, shirts like this did not exist in the period. That scooped neck look is something in the sort of theatre world and costume world are called charge shirts, because the shirt was sort of brought about by the film The Charge of the Light Brigade, where they did that scooped thing in order to create what they thought was the right silhouette with minimal sort of effort, as it were, rather than shirts of the period, like mine, are constructed with a straight front, and because of the natural fitting, it then fits properly around the neck and gives you the accurate silhouette that you need. And then we come to the Duke. I don't know what he's doing. You would always wear your cravat, neckwear, stock, etc. over your shirt. To expose that much skin and everything as a man, and to do that would have been a social disaster. But I feel in order to be historically accurate, he would have worn it over the top. The colour of his cravat, however, generally being black, would have been worn if he were in the military and with a military uniform, but generally that's in sort of service dress, so he wouldn't have been wearing a black cravat in the daytime. You'd either be wearing white or a lighter colour or patterned or something like that, but certainly not a black cravat. We've looked at the shirts, and they don't appear to be very close to what they would have worn during the period, especially as in this scene he's wearing a black shirt, which just didn't exist. It's throughout the 18th century and into the 19th century, it's all about wearing white linens close to your skin because it shows cleanliness next to godliness, and how well presented you were and how wealthy you were and all of that. It's all about white, bright shininess. Then we move on to waistcoats. There are so many in Bridgerton, and some are absolutely lovely. Some really, really good styles worn by this guy. However, generally speaking, they can be a little bit iffy, but let's discuss. So these are the sort of waistcoats you'd expect to be seeing, and these are the sort of waistcoats we're given. So you can see the differences. Now, in this scene in particular, you note that they're wearing the pointed waistcoat, which you commonly associate more with the 18th century, in this style, but this is actually a form or a take on the demi-habit. So they are wearing the frack style coat and the waistcoats, but then they're wearing trousers and boots. That would never happen. You wouldn't wear that sort of waistcoat with that sort of coat with boots and trousers in this period. It just was not a thing in 1813. Also, we then look at the legwear worn by the men. They are all wearing trousers. There is like a few examples of breeches, but generally you're seeing at 1813 more breeches than really anything else. This guy, background actor, looks great, and that's something that annoys me when the background characters are dressed more accurately sort of than the main cast, except this is an exception. So what I would have expected to see is far more breeches and boots, and some of the boots have crinkles in them, which was a fashion thing, but you wouldn't expect to see quite this much. They also said they wanted to show more colour and sex things up a little bit. So here are some examples of some really bland, boring Regency outfits from around the time. And here are some really very conservative, not at all sexed up outfits from the time as well. So history is full of sexiness and colour. We just need to bring it out. There's so much available there to show people, which I think is really, really useful. Okay, and now we get onto the subject of coats. Once again, I will not be discussing whether anything is good or bad. These silhouettes, they are wearing shoulder pads. And the silhouette is very 1820s, 1830s. You know, well out of time period. This is the sort of style you're going for, the more sloped shoulder. It's about creating an elegant look. This is very boxy, what our modern eyes are used to seeing in high fashion and things like this. And this is something we've been shown a lot, as opposed to it actually being something which is really accurate. Further regarding coats, in this image, you can see these colours of coats, and that's perfectly acceptable. That's fine. Those are really nice colours, and colours you would have seen during the period. They're nice, they're bright, they're lovely. What I disagree with is the fact they're paired with trousers, and I think it ruins the silhouette and it crunches things up. Now, his tailcoat, the guy on the right, the problem there, one thing that really bothers me anyway, is how far down his buttons and buttonholes go on his coat. Because this crops up a lot, and this bothers me a lot. From the middle of the 18th century right the way through, you have the fact that the buttons end at the waist, or where the pockets are, and they just want to keep going. They always stop at that waist point. It's a way of shaping the body, framing the body. It's just how the silhouette went, how the fashion went. You don't see any coats from that period where the buttons and buttonholes go below the pockets. It's just not something you see, and I keep seeing it over and over again, and it just drives me a little bit insane. Because it's an easy fix, and it's less work. Less buttonholes, less buttons. However, a redeeming feature, I do love his hair. Big hair, crazy hair was certainly a thing. The women, however, the hair is all over the place. Now, that was a design choice, but during the period, in the day, women would have been wearing bonnets, married women would have been wearing caps. Even in the evening, you can wear things like veils, which are things we don't really see apart from the wedding, which is just lovely. A relationship between the trousers and the boots, you find that they're not sort of tight enough, and therefore they look sort of crushed into the boots, and that just ruins the silhouette that they would have had at the time. What I really like, which a lot of period dramas don't actually get right at all, is they did a lot of work with things like this. These things are fobs. They are where you'd keep your pocket watch in the waistband of your breeches, pantaloons or trousers. And I love that they've included this detail. It's really good, and that's an incredibly accurate thing. In terms of the layering, they've got that accurate. In terms of the colour palette, they've generally got that quite accurate. We have an idea of the past being very dull in colour, when in fact it was far brighter than we really give credit to. A lot of bold colours and things like that are used, and that's really wonderful. But yes, as you can see, it really bothers me when the background characters look a lot more sort of put together than the main cast. And also, can we talk about the fact that the Duke apparently only has one style of coat? You see him wear the same coat in just different colours and materials the whole time. It is not a period accurate silhouette, it is not a period accurate look. The flipped back lapel is something you could see in the 1780s on a very different style, as well as the button down collar isn't really something you see either. And this whole thing wouldn't have been something you would have seen. Now let's talk about the very first scene. Here you have the ladies dressed like this. They look wonderful. This looks really good. It looks very exciting. It looks wonderful. Except it's French. This is the style of French court dress. Here we are, French court dress. Now, let's remember that Queen Charlotte was on the throne at the time in 1813. The Regency had happened, but she was still sort of running court with the Prince Regent there as well. And her court rules stayed in effect. For the ladies to wear the panier of the previous century, but they wanted to update it, so they mixed it with Regency fashion to create things like this. It's mental. But I would love to see this done on film with the budget. These gowns were so sumptuous and expensive, and the descriptions we have of such gowns are phenomenal. A description of one of the court dresses. The birthday of King George III dresses Her Majesty, the Queen, Queen Charlotte, a lilac and silver tissue petticoat, trimmed with draperies of point Brussels lace, with point lace of the same description, flowered round the pocket holes. The front of the drapery is superbly ornamented with large diamond rosettes, from which were suspended diamond bows and tassels. The under drapery fancifully ornamented with diamonds in diagonal stripes. The mantle to correspond with the drapery. Her Royal Highness the Princess Charlotte of Wales, pink and silver slip, with a beautiful Brussels lace frock to wear over it, and a pink and silver girdle. Her Royal Highness and Princess Augusta, a yellow crepe petticoat richly embroidered with silver, a sash across with a border of honeysuckles, and a rich pointed embroidered draperies, body and train to correspond. Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth, a superb dress of apricot and silver tissue. The right side of the dress, a magnificent drapery composed of an Etruscan net of large silver beads, tastefully divided at distances by a thick bullion of beads, chains of beads in dead silver, relieved with bright bullion, elegantly ornamented with massy wreaths of laurel in silver foil, and bouquets of chestnut blossoms, with the kernel bursting from the shell, form the tout ensemble of this strikingly novel and elegant dress, which for taste and effect surpassed any dress of the kind we have observed. The bottom finishing with a wreath of laurel in raised foil and beads. Hello, I'm doing Le Feminine. The whole looped up with large silver cords and tassels. Robe of apricot and silver tissue trimmed with broad Van Dyck silver trim. Point lace and diamonds. Her Royal Highness Princess Mary wore a magnificent dress of brown crepe embroidered with silver and pink roses over a petticoat of royal purple, oval draperies richly spangled all over, and terminated with marking borders of dead and bright foil in Van Dycks, with roses beautifully interspersed lightly in the embroidery, the whole completed with elegant cords and tassels. Robe of brown, purple, and silver tissue trimmed with broad Van Dyck fringe, point lace and diamonds. Her Royal Highness the Princess Sophia, a pea green petticoat, etc, 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 etc. They are all wearing the most sumptuous, over-the-top looks. And here's what they mean by Van Dyck trims. These weren't plain things. These weren't retiring garments. These weren't the simple silhouettes and things that you expect of the Regency. These were big, exciting pieces. Yes, it's the King's birthday, so they step it up a bit, but also this is the court. This is the royal court of England. You have to remember at this time, everything is about the court, which is why Napoleon, when he re-establishes the French court, decides to make it as opulent as possible in a new style. So the two courts are sort of competing. With the season being from November to July, we would have seen a much more varied range of coats, such as this, 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 and this, for men and women. Once again, trousers in 1813, but look how they're constructed and taper towards the bottom instead of being straight down the leg. It's all about the tapering of the silhouette. I would have liked to have seen things like this. This is a nice summery outfit from 1813. Once again, you are seeing trousers, but look at how they're tapered and shaped. The seams along the side aren't straight, they curve around the body to give a look of musculature. This is the demi-habit, the sort of thing you'd expect to see in the evening, or for sort of, semi-formal court stuff and things like this, the bicorn is still being worn a lot by men, especially in the evening, or for formal events. It's basically the top hat of its day, where now the top hat is the most formal thing. Back then, the bicorn was the most formal thing, and the top hat was just for day. You don't see top hats being worn in the evening until 1816 is the earliest one I can find to a formal evening event of someone wearing a top hat. Going to court, you would have seen the men wear this. The 18th century styles have still kept around a little bit, but here they've moved on to this sort of slimmed down version. Why were there none of these coats? They're the best looking coats. They're great. They could have done those. 1813. Look. Breeches, boots, the whole thing's put together well, and you can still be damn good looking and sexy doing it. This is actually a French plate from the Peace of 1814, so they switch back to the French royal court look, which actually resembles the English court look, because of course all the English men going to court would have had their hair powdered. So they would have had Regency hairstyles, but they would have been grey and white, because they would have, quite literally, hair powder in them. So that's fun, and that's something you don't see, and it's something I'd really like to see on film. The silhouettes they're going for in the evening are very 1830s in terms of the triangular style of the silhouette, and they kind of look like this fashion plate from 1818, which has that whole monochrome look of black on black. So this is an excerpt from a description from 1808. It's a little bit earlier, but it gives you a very good impression of the sorts of things that people would have been wearing. General observations on gentlemen's dress. The most fashionable coats for evening still remain dark blues, with full-size gilt buttons and black velvet collars, or forest greens, with buttons covered with cloth and collars of the same. White waistcoats of clear, light drab kerseymere breeches with silk strings at the knee. Light-coloured mixtures of drab coats are again resuming their station for morning dress, and these are made single-breasted and, after buttoning on the breast, slope regularly away to the skirts. They are also something shorter in the skirt than the evening coat, have flat plated buttons and collars of the same. Quilted Marseille waistcoats, single-breasted in a variety of small stripes on a white ground. White corduroy breeches made rather long, with pearl buttons at the knees, and boots with brown tops. White India dimity trousers, also non-keen trousers and gaiters. Some few striped trousers we have seen worn, but they are considered as only adopted for dirty weather or for wearing at the watering places. So we get on to headwear, and very few of the main cast are really ever seen wearing hats, which is problematic, because during the time period it was a modesty thing and it was a gentlemanly thing, a genteel thing to do to wear a hat. You wouldn't leave the house without wearing your hat. It was a sign of just decency. I don't get it with modern interpretations where they go, in order to show that this young female character is a free spirit, we're going to have her running around without a hat on and being free with her hair down. I get that, but if you did that during the period, you'd be seen as a pariah. That's one of the ways that a lady of questionable virtue would signal to people that she was a lady of questionable virtue and that she might be available, or a bit of a loose woman. Get that term? A loose woman? Because the hair isn't up and pinned, and it seems to be a trope of historical drama to have no one wearing hats. I think that's an important nuance that you're missing. Everybody in the world of Bridgerton is conforming to social convention and social construction. And then to take away one of the grounding points in that doesn't really seem to make much sense to me. One of those signifiers of the nuances of societal hierarchy. Okay, so now that we've looked at a lot of the main cast men, who are mainly civilian, let's look at the one person that is a civilian but wears military. So here we have the prince, because of course, what fairy tale is without a prince? So we've got one, and he is, I think, from Prussia. Now, they're trying to emulate sort of this uniform, approximately, and the cut they've got and the style they looks super Victorian, as opposed to 1813, Regency, everything like that. Just doesn't fit. But the thing that annoys me more than anything else about this guy is his aglets. Those scrambly looking things. In fact, in the military they're affectionately called scrambled eggs, which is cute. And I've got some here which are Victorian, and they've got these pokey bits. These ones are gold. And they've decided to put this pokey bit through the buttonhole, which is just really not right. It's almost like they have these little hooky things which go around the buttons so they hang. They don't just poke through, and they can't even be consistent with it. So sometimes he's wearing them, sometimes it's pointed through a little bit. It's just not how it works. They could have just Googled aglets, or just not worn them, and this is what they should look like. This is how they should be worn. Okay? Lots of examples of how they should be worn. Nothing annoyed me more. Go back and watch the series and just look at his aglets. And it's a disaster. Did no one in the costuming department or during the editing, or did anyone actually think it through? Yes, it's an opinion, but also it's correct. It just looks awful. But to then have him wearing aglets not even properly, and with these bits sort of poking through the buttonholes, big rant on my bit. You know, I can't look at the guy, but he's got nice blonde hair, so that's nice. Another thing that screams historical inaccuracy is worn by my least favourite character, Daphne. Don't fight me in the comments. So, after the duel scene, there's this whole situation where she goes back and she does this undressing thing. Which is actually rather nice because you get to see the layering involved. Great. Hook size and stuff, not a problem. Shift, stays, all that's good. Until it comes to the boots. Now, I could forgive it if they didn't show her taking off the boots and it was sort of like thrown to the side, but they decide to show her taking off the boots and then they do a close-up on it. Those are modern, zip up the side, pleather, tread heel. They zoom in on it, you can see the clip, you can see the zip. I mean, I'd maybe let it go if they didn't literally zoom in on it. So that bothers me a bit. Overall, the footwear is here and there in terms of accuracy, but that's one bit that I just cannot forgive. Also, as we're talking about 1813, I think it would have been really nice to have seen something like this. Maybe season 2. So, in summary, I really rather enjoyed watching Bridgerton. I loved how imaginative and how they'd twisted things with a modern look. There are over 7,000 pieces in there, and I am astonished at the work that was put into it. It is a complete feast for the eyes. It's absolutely wonderful. What they've done is they've created an alternative world, which I think is really nice. It's not historically accurate because it's not meant to be, and that's what I think is fun. I would like to see things when they are set in history, talking about real people, to actually be a bit more historically accurate, so that we get a better impression of the people, their experiences, and things like that. But once again, I'm not here to say whether something is good or bad. I'm just saying how accurate the clothing is. And I think that's really useful, because I don't want people to watch something and get the wrong impression and use that as their basis for the understanding of a period and the people. Because after all, we have to remember that clothes have never been just clothes. Clothes are social history. They have a story and they tell people about things. But I hope you have enjoyed spilling the tea with me.